Hi, I'm John Fugelsang. I'm a comedian and SiriusXM radio host, and I'm the author of the book Separation of Church and Hate. And I got to be honest, I'm glad to be here, but I want to tell all you nice people, please, seriously, don't encourage this.
Broadcasting just steps away from the glistening campus of Miami University in the heart of Oxford, Ohio. You're listening to Don't Encourage This, a series of interviews and conversations with artists and interfaith voices on meaning-making and the creative process. I'm your host, Mark Van Bullock. I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church USA. My guest this episode is a stand-up comedian and the host of Tell Me Everything, which airs daily on SiriusXM Progress, channel 127. His show covers everything from politics to media to religion and pop culture. He's appeared on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, probably more times than he can count. He's appeared on Comedy Central, The Daily Show, the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, HBO's U.S. Comedy Arts Festival. He's been murdered on CSI, and unrelated to that, once famously prompted a Republican campaign advisor to call Mitt Romney an Etch-a-Sketch on live TV. It's true. It was back in 2012. Look it up. His New York Times...
Long ago, that was scandalous. Long ago.
Yes, it was. His New York Times bestselling book, Separation of Church and Hate, is available now from Simon & Schuster. It is such a personal thrill to welcome John Fugelsang as my guest on this episode of Don't Encourage This. John, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. What a thrill.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
I wanted to start with a question that I know you get asked this a zillion times. I don't think I've heard you do a single interview where you haven't been asked this, but some of our listeners might not know this. This program has an interest in ecumenical, interfaith voices and stories, and you come from a very unique ecumenical family growing up on Long Island.
Sure. My mom was a nun for 16 years. My mother went into the convent right out of high school. My father was a Franciscan brother who taught Catholic boys at St. Francis Prep in Brooklyn. He taught history and coached basketball. Just a normal dad who happened to dress like a Jedi Knight walking around.
As you do.
My mother was sent by the convent to work with lepers in Malawi, Africa. But first they stationed her briefly at Holy Family Hospital in Brooklyn, and that's how she met my dad, who fell madly in love and knew he wasn't allowed to ever say he was madly in love. So he became good friends with this nun and wrote her a lot when she went off to Africa. And eventually, after 10 years, he finally got up the guts to tell her he was in love with her and always had been. It's a very long story, but he finally got her to quit and go on a date and see how it worked out. And 2 months later, they got married. And as I say in the book, that's why I became a comedian, because I could never afford the therapy I actually would require from that particular parentage. So yeah, sometimes you find out your parents were married to somebody else. I found out both my parents were married to God, and then he got heavy visitation rights in our house.
Well, and you sort of glided over that comment of he got her to quit to go on a date. But when you're in a sort of a ministerial profession, that's a huge decision to make. And that really speaks to the love and connection that they felt for each other over so many years.
Yeah, there was a lot going on at the time, but my mother had reached a point where she felt it might be time for her to go as well. And my father, one day he just said to his superior, I'm thinking about maybe leaving. That's all he said, was he was thinking about maybe leaving.
Wow. And
his superior just said, if you love her, marry her.
Oh, nice.
That was all the guy said.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it was the late 60s. It was, not uncommon, especially after Vatican II, for this sort of thing. So, yeah, I had the model of a dad who was madly in love with his wife, which was a great gift. And it was also abnormally Catholic, shall we say.
Well, and you write about this in your book very beautifully, John, that your parents, who both came from this background, from unique points of view, they really modeled an example to you about what the faith looks like that, quite frankly, contrasts a lot of what we see today. It's advocating for justice. It's advocating for the poor. It's advocating for social work. And a lot of times we turn on the news and advocating for faith doesn't look like those things.
Yeah, I think millions of Americans were raised to believe that Christianity was supposed to be about the stuff Christ taught.
Yeah, heaven forbid.
I think millions of us were raised thinking, this is a religion of peace and empathy and love and service and humility. Because above all, Jesus was about humility. The last shall be first. How you treat the lowest is how you treat me. Go to the margins and help the marginalized. Don't execute people. Pay your taxes. Matthew 25, Jesus says individuals and nations will be judged by 4 criteria. It's not how loudly you scream at women outside clinics or how mean you are to non-Christians or how superior you are or how much money you give your church or how loudly you proclaim that you believe in Jesus to be the Son of God. No, Jesus gives 4 criteria for salvation. You'd think the church would talk about this more, but he said, you'll be judged by how well you took care of the sick, how well you took care of the poor, how well you welcome the stranger, and how well you care for those in prison. That's it. That's his marching orders. So millions of us, I think, grew up thinking, oh, this is the religion. This is what Jesus' movement is. How are we going to be kind to the least of these? And then you grow up to find out that it's been hijacked, sort of, by this mean, white supremacist, tax-free clique that's all about superiority. Jesus' whole thing was humility, not total domination of the school board. And we live in this country now where you see this very powerful movement that has always been there that's not about helping the marginalized, and it's not about peace, and it's not about any of the teachings in the gospel. It's about Christian control over society and culture.
Yeah.
That's it, domination. And Jesus' whole movement was never about domination. It was always about individual transformation.
Much to the chagrin of his followers. I mean, he had followers in the Bible who were kind of maybe hoping that they could nudge him in that direction, and he very stubbornly refused to do so.
Well, they don't really teach us as kids what it's like to grow up under military occupation by Rome in first century Judea.
Right.
And the Jesus movies, I grew up watching them, love the magic tricks, love all that. But you don't really get a sense of what it's like that they were living in a slave society, that Jesus was raised in a police state, that so many of his teachings are directly about Rome and how to act when Rome abuses you. They grew up in a world where they weren't free. Jesus is walking with his parents, was a kid, and if some soldier came up and saw his dad and said, "Hey, Jew, carry my gear right now for a mile," you had to leave your family and pick up the guy's gear and carry it for a mile.
Right.
That was quite literally Jews of Jesus' age would measure exactly a 1-mile marker from their homes in case this happened again. So they'd know exactly when they had walked a mile and be able to stop. Jesus comes into this world and goes, nah, someone asks you to go walk a mile, you go a second one for free.
Yeah.
It wasn't resist them and give them the finger and tell them off and have armed violent revolt, which is what a lot of the apostles and a lot of the folks who welcomed him on Palm Sunday were thinking he was here to do. That he was going to be a violent liberator.
Yes.
Jesus' whole message is quite the opposite. It is non-cooperation with that kind of imperial authority, much like Gandhi, but it wasn't armed resistance. And so when he says walk the extra mile, that really is the most holy, spiritual, and peaceful way of saying, nah, screw you, bro. And that's exactly what it was. So his teachings were anti-Rome, but they were also anti-violence at the same time. He saw a kingdom that was within you, and just by saying there's another kingdom, you're sentencing yourself to death in a society by saying there's a king other than Caesar. So we don't really have the context for how truly revolutionary Jesus was, but we also know how much he disappointed a lot of the people of his own time by not being the Messiah they needed. But again, it was a message that was so consistently nonviolent, and it's troublesome to see how this has evolved since Rome took over his operation, where for centuries there's been 2 strains of Christianity, one that follows the teachings of Christ and one that's all about total domination of this club.
John, I just so appreciate that you mentioned Jesus's example of non-cooperation. That is so true. We could spend the whole episode talking about that, but if our listeners if they have some interest in that topic, Walter Wink is a biblical scholar who really digs deep into that.
Walter Wink talks a lot about how violence is sacralized.
Yes.
And how that's always been the process, which, since Rome took over, you just bring in some guy in a funny hat and a dress to say some words in Latin, and suddenly your war is holy.
Yeah.
And that's why waging war for Christian rulers has always been essential to have clergy there to say, oh, yes, yes, yes. This is how it's always been done. They always have to get around Jesus, and there have always been fraudulent clergy who will bless any kind of violence in exchange for proximity to power.
Now, you graduated from NYU, from the Tisch School of the Arts. Is that right?
Yes.
You have a degree in film and television?
Yes, sir.
I was really interested in that.
Oh, as a creative person, I always wanted to do everything. I wanted to be an actor and a comedian, and I wanted to write, and I wanted to do television hosting, and you name it. And once I moved to Hollywood, I was getting offered a lot of really dopey hosting jobs that I didn't like, and paid very well, but not very inspiring. And it just drove me much more into politics. I grew up doing regional theater. From age 11 on, I really hung out with grown-ups all the time. I think I was 11 the first time I got paid for being in a play, and that was it. I was hooked. By the time I was 12, I was in a production of Hamlet.
Whoa.
And I spent several months of 7th grade finishing my homework early and going to rehearsal and being around adults and working on Hamlet every night for like 3 or 4 months of 7th grade. It was the most incredible gift a 12-year-old could ever be given. Like, I had Hamlet memorized by the time I finished 7th grade.
It's a heavy play for 7th grade.
Oh, yeah, but it was, well, you're into Star Wars, it's the themes are already in you.
Yeah.
It was something that turned the world from black and white to color for me. And I always wanted to do a lot of different things. So yeah, when I started New York University in the theater school, and then I transferred to the film and TV school, I really wanted to learn editing and production a bit. I wanted to learn how to actually cut film with a razor blade and tape it right before digital changed everything.
Yeah.
That was my goal. I wanted to be the last person to spend a large amount of money to learn a technology that would be dead very soon.
The way that George Lucas and Marty Scorsese, well, George Lucas went the digital route. Marty Scorsese still.
No, but they both learned on a scene back. I mean, they both, I was there cutting the film with a razor blade and taping it over with the spool holes and everything. And
so good.
Out of college, I wound up getting into stand-up comedy. I was running a dorm for NYU and trying to figure out how to use all this stuff I had learned and wanted to do. And I had always wanted to be George Carlin when I grew up. And so I began that as well. And that led to television hosting. I wanted to do a lot of different things. And that was always a passion for me, to learn and to experience different stuff. So that was a great adventure. And that led to political stuff. Doing stand-up really led me to really want to do political material. I wanted to be George Carlin when I grew up. So that led me to today. So it's been kind of fun to get to have a career where I get to do so many different things and explore so many different sides of myself. And I never thought I'd write a book. I just never thought I'd be able to do it. I thought that was the one thing I wouldn't do. And now here I am writing a second one.
Oh, cool.
Next, hopefully, will be a puppetry or tap dancing. That hopefully be the next things I get into.
You mentioned George Carlin as being someone who was such a big influence on you because, first of all, he was a brilliant comedian, but he was able to use comedy to make a point, to have a point of view. And I think comedy is always at its best when it has something to say other than just, what's the deal with peanuts on the airplane and all that.
I agree. That's what we remember. Yeah, I mean, there's a place for dopey, stupid comedy as well.
Of course.
I mean, God knows I love that. And God knows after all these years of writing political stuff, it's actually harder and more rewarding to do dopey, stupid stuff now.
Sure.
When I can just write a good, dumb joke, I feel so glad because otherwise I don't want to be too cerebral. My dad was a history teacher, and a lot of it was, how am I going to earn Dad's love? How am I going to get closer to him? I would do Bill Maher's show all the time in my 20s to please my dad. I knew he'd be watching. I sucked at sports. So to this day, it's sort of the same thing. When I was 6, I memorized who all the presidents were. My dad took me to D.C. as a gift for my first communion, and I was always passionate about history. And that led to a passion for politics, and it all kind of came together. And as a comedian, I wanted to start talking about religion and spirituality. And my parents, for many years, would not allow me to tell people how I'd been raised. And my managers and agents were adamant about, don't talk about religion, it's career death. And they were right. It's a very dangerous third rail to do. But I don't know. I always thought there's an audience for this, and I felt called to do it. And God bless my old manager. He would get so mad at me, but it felt like I was being called to do material about it. I first pitched this book in 2010. This was rejected. I had people say to me, no one's going to buy it. So it took me 13 years of pitching this book before I finally sold it. And that was very gratifying after 13 years of rejection to have the book make the New York Times bestseller list for the first 2 months it came out. Because I always knew there was an audience there of people who understood that hate is not a Christian value.
But don't you think the fact that you do talk about religion, and you talk about religion in, I'm sad to say, in a unique way. I wish more people talked about religion the way that you talk about religion.
Oh, they do. They just, there's a lot of people talk about religion like I do, and much more intelligently than me. They're just not on the airwaves all the time doing it.
And that's exactly what I wish more people who were on the airwaves talked about it. But don't you think that that's part of what makes John Fugelsang comedy stand out from other comedic voices is that you do speak about this very important dimension of people's lives with nuance and with authenticity in a way that we don't often hear from other folks on the airwaves. And
that's very kind of you to say. Well, I think so many of us have these spiritual yearnings, and we're fed this binary existence of you're either a conservative believer or you're an atheist. These seem to be the two options our televisions tell us we can do. You can either be a non-believer or you can be screaming at women outside clinics somewhere. Pick one lane. This is really what the TV has presented us my whole life. As a kid, I'd turn on the TV and they would have religious leaders. It was people like Jerry Falwell and people like Pat Robertson who don't quote anything Jesus ever talked about. But Jerry Falwell was a segregationist. They're all about control over society, but you start talking about the actual teachings of Christ and suddenly they call you a socialist. It's kind of you, but I always knew that there was an audience out there of people who thought Christianity was the stuff Jesus taught us about. And this is not for me to ever claim that I think I'm a good Christian. I've never been. I know a lot of great Christians. I've never been a good one. So for me, the trick was I didn't want to come off as being pious and being like, I'm the real Christian and here's my church. And it's, no, I'm a bigger disaster than most of these guys. But I know what's in the Bible. I have this very curious parentage. And look, the truth is about adulthood, whatever makes you a freak as a child will make you unique as an adult.
It's true.
Right?
It's so true.
The thing that made you not able to ever blend in as a kid, if you cultivate it, will be the thing that makes you really different as a grown-up.
That'll become your superpower.
Yeah, so it has been strange for me. And now that the book was a hit, I get a much more pious level of death threat. But,
God.
But yeah, it really felt like a calling, and it felt in a way like, well, this is all my skills combined. This is writing, this is comedy, this is my knowledge of scripture growing up, and this is my passion for politics and my passion for calling out cruelty as policy. And so much of Christianity since Rome's big acquisition 1,700 years ago has been about sanctifying cruelty so that it can be sold as policy to Christians.
Yeah.
And the truth is that once you realize that Jesus' teachings are as threatening to empire now as they were 2,000 years ago,
100%.
The patterns are incredible.
Yeah, and the dynamics sadly have not changed all that much. The cultural trappings have changed, but the human corruption hasn't.
And yet we've gotten kinder.
Yeah, I hope so.
Right? And yet, in many ways, I think humans have gotten closer to Jesus, whereas power and institutions have gotten further away.
That's
if
true.
you had told me in the 1990s that in 30 years we'd have a black president, that we'd have marriage equality for LGBTQ brothers and sisters.
You've been laughed out of the room.
If you told me that we'd stop throwing people in jail for weed in the 90s, I would not have believed humans were capable of such kindness.
Yeah.
And I see it with young people now. This Islamophobia garbage isn't working. Young people have grown up with Muslim classmates. They've grown up with Latino classmates. They've grown up with gay classmates. You'll always have your bigots and tribalists. But a lot of the bigotry that sold when I was a kid doesn't work anymore. Economically, we've gotten much worse. The middle class is the top of the bottom, and we could talk about trickle-down economics and how people are suckered all day long. But I do believe that humans are getting kinder and that we're wired to be kinder. In 20 years, kids are going to be shocked at how transgender folks were treated right now.
100%.
The way teenagers now are shocked at how homophobic everybody was 20 years ago.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think you're exactly right.
I hope so.
On your SiriusXM radio show, you describe yourself as a wildly unqualified and highly neurotic comedian.
Oh, do I? Okay.
And you give a number of disclaimers at the beginning of your book about not being a trained scholar or a clergy person.
Oh, yes. I warn everybody. I warn people.
However, I want to say, if anyone has heard you do stand-up or do interviews with the press or has read your book, one of the things I think they pick up on very quickly is that you are a very serious student of the Hebrew Bible, the Greek New Testament. As funny as your comedy is, your exegesis doesn't mess around. I mean, it would give many seminary students, I think, a run for their money, in my estimation.
It's very kind. I actually say in the introduction to the book that I will only be using the word exegesis once in the book in this sentence. I make a promise in the very beginning that the word exegesis is only in this sentence I'm using right now, and I'll never say it again. I love reading actual books like that, but I learned a long time ago not to pretend I'm smarter than I am and not to pretend I'm a scholar where I'm not or a journalist where I'm not. So for me, that's just part of the parameters I get to work with because parameters stimulate creativity. Like if I came out and pitched myself as this Christian expert, if I went out and got a degree to have the credibility and had letters after my name, who cares? Like people do that with credibility. That's not me. I had to find my own voice and find a way around it.
And at the end of the day, I think people care about the kindness in your life more than all those credentials and all that stuff anyway.
Some do. Some would call that weakness.
Well,
Some would call that wokeness.
yeah, I suppose that's true.
He lived long enough to see everything Jesus talked about written off as woke by his loudest, most obnoxious followers. But have you noticed this? Every generation, they find a new way to smear basic ideas of kindness.
That's true.
And we've seen that through history, the way people look down on Dr. King, the way people look down on activism. But when I was a kid, oh, you bleeding heart. That was how they smeared kindness and empathy. Oh, you mean like Jesus and all the paintings, the bleeding heart?
Yeah.
And then by the 80s and 90s, we were trying to use language to not be cruel, to not be so dickish to each other. And it became, oh, you're politically correct. You're so politically correct.
I was just going to say politically correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wait, I'm trying to change language so I'm not hurtful to our brothers and sisters and I'm kinder. And you have a smear for that? I mean, sure, people go too far with the political correctness. Yeah, but like the basic idea with it was about kindness. And then it became what? Social justice warriors?
Yeah.
You SJW, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and everybody we admire in history. Now it's woke. They took an old term used in African American culture to imply an awareness of structural racism and danger and a need to change it. That's what woke meant. And they turned it into a way of smearing anyone who is empathy, anyone who cares about groups that aren't white, heterosexual Christian men. Sure, liberals are annoying as hell, but for God's sakes, if you're going to try to sell yourself as the Christian, you're going to try to sell yourself as the Christ follower, and you're going to disparage anyone who wants to do anything to help the less fortunate? Virtue signaling was the other one.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't cut funding to people in Africa for AIDS. Maybe we should keep feeding the poor. Oh, look at you, virtue signaling.
Yep.
Like the virtue signaling on the Mount? I mean, Jesus warns us about virtue signaling. Jesus tells you in Matthew 6:5, don't trust those guys who are praying in public on the sidewalk so they can be seen.
It's true.
And when he gives the instructions to the Our Father and says you should pray in private, you should pray in secret.
Unlike the hypocrites in the street who distort their faces and do all this performative.
Yeah, they want to be seen doing it. Their thirsty audition for America's Next Top Christian, all kneeling in the well of the house where the cameras are aimed in pious prayer so that you can see how humble they are. Can you see how humble we are? Can you want the lighting better? We want you to show how humble we're being. It's like, go into an office and pray. Oh, no, that's not why you're doing it. You're not praying for communion.
It's exactly what we read in church on Ash Wednesday, almost word for word, just modernized a bit.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
They're praying so that there could be pictures of them so they can use it to campaign to show how devout and pious they are.
Yep.
They don't fight for the actual teachings of Jesus. And those are the two Christianities, the one that assumes it's better than other people and the one that fights for other people.
I've followed your comedy and your stand-up for a long time.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. I do.
I wanted to ask you, given your background and I know you won't use the word exegesis, but your love of that kind of scholarship, you could have probably gone into the clergy if you wanted to. Did you ever think about that or consider that?
I thought about it, yeah. But I liked women too much, and I wasn't about to embrace celibacy as my parents had. That was never an option for me. I had a lot of priests when I was a kid who wanted me to. I had priests who asked about it. I always felt a certain romantic attachment for that, but I also had a distrust of organized religion as well.
Yeah, sure.
So no, I never seriously considered it. I'm not that good a person. I just like calling out the hypocrites. Jesus shows us the way.
Well, I can tell you from experience, there are avenues of the clergyhood that don't have that little requirement.
Oh, I know. But when you're raised in Catholicism, come on now.
Fair.
All these strange Protestant ways. It took me I didn't know what a Protestant was until I was 20 years old. I grew up on Long Island. It was Jews and Catholics. That was all I knew. I finally married a Protestant person, and I was like, oh my God, your family's so small. How civilized. You don't have 400 cousins? What? What's wrong with you Lutherans? My wedding was like, here's my family, and her entire family's in this corner over here. Like, here's the Southerners, here's the Brooklyners, and there's the Protestants, that little in the corner, all of them. Yeah.
The scared merry band of introverts hiding in the corner.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so follow-up question. So why stand-up? Why comedy? What was it about comedy that spoke to your soul, and how did you wind up pivoting into that lane?
The first time I saw George Carlin live was during that first Gulf War, the popular Gulf War, the one to restore the dictator of Kuwait that had a 93% approval rating. When we sent our troops to put the dictator of Kuwait back in power for freedom, where women are property and you can have your hands chopped off, and we're going to put them back in power for freedom. It was a dark time back then under the first President Bush. I was very young, but our ambassador to Iraq had told Saddam Hussein that America had no point of view at all on his border dispute, essentially giving him a green light to invade his neighbor Kuwait. Then suddenly, we have to have war. And it was the longest time for me. I remember the victory parade, and there was a group of clergy praying in New York City silently and at the parade, and people began chanting at the priests and nuns who were praying because war is against Jesus. This meanness that took over the country, this zeal, this bloodlust for power and conquest that I had never seen before. I grew up in the shadows of Vietnam. I grew up hearing how bad war was all the time. And suddenly you got Whitney Houston lip-syncing the national anthem in a stadium, and it becomes a single. And I was very young. I didn't understand it. It was terrifying. And I went to see George Carlin. It was the Jammin' in New York tour, which is my favorite album of his, and it's where he said he stopped being a comedian and became an essayist. And he walks on stage, and he opened with this incredible, blistering attack on this popular war.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard anyone else speak this way. I mean, like, everyone I knew was so in love with this war. It was so popular. And I just was like a kid who just thought it's all built on lies and manipulation. They hired a PR firm. There were no babies thrown out of incubators. That was a lie. It was all just to get you on the side of a war for oil.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. And George Carlin walked on stage and told the truth, spat it, had a whole room cheering him. And I'm like, this room has to be people who supported this war, but they're laughing at this. And I realized how powerful laughter was and how it could break down even hypocrisy, that it could break down programming, that George Carlin, with all of his vulgarity and anti-religious talk, was preaching the gospel in a way that got through to people.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my life as an audience member that a comedian made me feel less alone in the world.
Oh.
And it changed me.
So I'm someone who preaches from a pulpit on Sunday mornings, and I do, and I do sometimes wonder if it's a somewhat archaic way of trying to transmit these conversations to a community. And stand up, like George Carlin, like yours, and like others, I do wonder if that is in some ways a modernized manifestation of that same relationship with an audience.
Totally. That's why I got into it. I mean, I think the same calling that led you, Mark, into that, it's all creativity. Jesus used parable and metaphor to convey truth. Been out here giving a long list of things you can't do. I always like to say the Bible doesn't have a lot of facts, but it does have a lot of truth.
That's right.
And Jesus was able to reach so many people by doing creative storytelling, rather than just coming out and preaching and saying, do this, don't do that. When you're actually using metaphor the way Jesus was, you can reach so many more people, especially non-educated people, especially when you want to be able to make sure the Roman Empire doesn't kill you for preaching against them. So you want to go heavy on the metaphor.
Yeah.
And it also makes your audience remember the points you were trying to make. Things like the prodigal son or the good shepherd or the lost sheep. Don't put your light under a bushel. He had a great way of conveying a message indirectly using an entertainment medium. And I think the best pastors, I'm sure you'll agree, are able to do that. And it's not really all that different from a comedian. If you're telling truths in entertaining ways, it's going to make the audience lean in.
I was teaching a confirmation class years ago. I've told this story on other podcasts before. We were talking about Jesus' teaching in parables. And there was this 12-year-old kid in the class, and he piped in and said, so Jesus spoke in parables. And he said, and so Jesus is God incarnate. If God incarnate taught in parables, and if God inspired the Bible, are there other parables in the Bible that we don't even necessarily know about? I remember in that moment thinking, this kid just got it. The light bulb went off.
He got it.
He just got it. He just figured it out.
Look, we can't prove any of it, right? Like this was my problem with organized religion. And I don't get angry and resent it like a lot of people, but you can't prove any of this actually happened. That's why it's called faith.
Yeah.
The opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. So for me as a kid who cared about discretion, who cared about the truth, but also wanted to be loyal and good, it was a bit of a struggle. And one thing I realized was you can believe in the divinity of Jesus and believe in the miracles and that he's the Son of God, and that's great. Forcing that belief on other people is not a great way for a religion to spread.
No.
Believe in this 2,000-year-old supernatural account or you'll go to hell. It doesn't really clock too well. And in fact, even in Conclave, there's a great passage where Ray Fine says, this curse of certainty that we have, and fundamentalists live on certainty. Oh, they know all of this is true. They know so badly that they don't really have to be respectful to your beliefs because they have the truth and they're here to impose their truth
Right.
on you. That's how much they care. But the teachings of Jesus, we have those. And I'm not saying don't believe in the divinity or the miracles at all. Go ahead, believe in those. But what I'm saying is that the teachings of Jesus can transcend ideological lines. You can reach non-believers. We can talk about how revolutionary it is to be around armed imperial soldiers and tell a bunch of people, no, blessed are the meek.
Yeah.
They'll inherit the kingdom of earth. That you can get killed for that. We're not taught how dangerous these words were. We're taught they're pretty words. The truths of his teachings are revolutionary and cross theological and ideological lines. And that's how we reach people. That's how you can tell people Christianity is special. These actual teachings and how they rebelled against power without violence and called us to be better, or try to whip people until they believe a guy walked on water.
Yeah.
You tell me which one's better.
Years ago, when I lived in Arkansas, I was a regular attendee of this. It was an atheist group. Now, I don't consider myself an atheist, but I went to this group because I was desperately trying to cultivate a social life without having to worry about running into people that I would see in church.
I love that.
And I thought, well, the atheist group, they're not going to come to church. We would have conversations about this stuff. Well, what about like the miracles and, turning water into wine and the loaves and the fishes and all that? I mean,
What did you say?
at the end of the day, I'm not interested in proving magic. I'm more interested in what do those stories say to me about my life.
Same, yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. We weren't there. We don't know what actually happened, but I do know how that story speaks to me on whatever level you want that to look like. It's really the only thing that matters to folks sitting in the pews on Sunday.
Well, that's faith, right? There's faith and there's certainty. And again, fundamentalism, they are drowning in certainty. They know for a fact this, and this. Fundamentalists don't think they're better than you. They know that God thinks they're better than you. It's the fundamentalist Muslims, the fundamentalist Jews, the fundamentalist Christians, the extremes of all the religions. When our atheist friends say, religion is responsible for the war and oppression and treatment of women. And I'm like, no, man, no. It's the fundamentalism of all the religions. The overwhelming majority of Christians, Muslims, and Jews are getting along just fine and being groovy together right now around the world, working together, making businesses, building families, going to schools together, living in neighborhoods. The moderates are never the problem. And also, they're never the ones in power.
And fundamentalism, as I think you kind of hinted at this a little earlier, it's not just limited to religious folk. I mean, you can be absolutely committed to the love of power, the love of greed. There are political leaders that are just, their narrative is right, any other narrative is wrong, and it's just about accumulating political power, corporate greed, whatever you want. I mean...
Yeah, or just owning it, owning the faith. I mean, look at the Star Wars fans. Look at the Star Wars fans.
Guilty.
Right?
Yep.
But fundamentalist Star Wars fans,
yep,
who they don't enjoy it, they own it. How dare you profane the Kathleen Kennedy? How dare you apostate?
Oh my God, that was so awful.
They're like crazy jihadists, these Star Wars fans.
Yep.
Because this is our faith. We were raised in this. We own it. We require Star Wars to heal our childhood still because we can't grow up and are child men. So it's one thing to say, yeah, Rise of Skywalker had some storytelling problems, it's one thing to say, wait a second, somehow Palpatine survived, it's weak writing. But no, you look at the rage of the Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
And they have to own it. They have to own this and they will attack. I mean, there's people out there who would murder Kathleen Kennedy if they could because they don't like the first 3 episodes of The Acolyte or whatever the hell. Just look at how their devotion, right, to this thing that once made the world make sense, this thing that made them happy as children, and their devotion to it.
That gave us a sense of morality.
It gave us, and listen, I'm big on that. I think Star Wars taught me more about religion than religion.
Yeah.
I mean, Yoda, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. That taught me what the soul was. I learned more. I understood the soul more from Yoda than I did. And look at the Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker storyline.
Oh my God.
I got so much spiritually from it. So I respect it, but these guys who need to own it.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the racism and the misogyny in the sequels. So, okay, you didn't like the sequel.
Then don't watch it. You don't have to watch it if you don't
You
like
don't have
it.
to watch it. Yeah, it's like, come on, man. The animation's good. There's a lot of good. Disney's done some good Star Wars, but it doesn't matter. They're fundamentalists. They own this faith. They and they alone get to say what is true Star Wars and what is false Star Wars. And you see how this religious mentality warps people's perspective of how you're supposed to treat other folks.
Yes.
It's not about caring and using the Force and fighting the Empire in our galaxy. It's not about resisting authoritarianism in our galaxy.
Yeah.
You've just gotten suckered by the seductive allure of power. And their belief in Star Wars is that it's something pure that we own and that we get to decide who's real and who's not. And, okay, so you've alienated everybody. The girls have all left the party, and you 6 miserable white dudes are going to sit there and just talk about how The Last Jedi sucks and call that your religion? You know what I'm saying? Like, we see it happen in sports. It can happen anywhere when you become a fundamentalist and let your need to own something consume your identity, and your sense of purity is greater than your sense of kindness.
I mean, I could talk about Star Wars all day.
I could talk about Star Wars all day, Mark.
I promise our listeners we won't just talk about Star Wars.
I mean, it's still on topic to me.
It is, but I watched, there was a great documentary that was done on the making of the prequels. It's on Disney Plus. I can't remember what it was called, but they did a whole bit on Ahmed Best, who's the actor who played Jar Jar Binks, and he talked about how he struggled with suicide following the wake of all the backlash.
Jake Lloyd too. And I was watching. I mean, it's a heartbreak. I mean, folks should watch it because his words are much more powerful than my ability to summarize it. But hearing him speak candidly and openly and vulnerably about that struggle, and I thought to myself, I'm not a big fan of Jar Jar Binks, but that's not right. If we did that to him, we completely lost the plot of what this is supposed to be. Yeah.
We have lost the track.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the character sucked, but it's not the actor's fault.
No.
And, the funny thing about it is now I've got kids, and like a whole generation, 2 generations have now grown up loving those films. I mean, I love Jar Jar Binks now because I've had to see that movie 17,000 times. I know every line of dialogue that happens in that movie, and you know how they tried to fix the characters. And I love how Star Wars under Disney did an act of tremendous healing for Ahmed Best. Mandalorian Season 3. In the flashback, he plays the Jedi who saves little baby Yoda Grogu.
He does.
They took all that pain and they turned it into something beautiful, which to me is what Christianity is all about. Turn all that pain into joy. And how can you turn that pain into joy? And the whole question was, who was it that saved baby Yoda when the Empire took over? And it was the big mystery of the show. And it wound up being freaking Jar Jar Binks, the actor, playing another role.
Yeah.
To me, it was an incredible spiritual moment because it took all that pain and all that rejection and all that awkwardness, because, there's problems with Jar Jar.
Yes.
And it turned it into something beautiful and joyful and healing.
And life-affirming.
Yeah, it really did. Like for me, I was someone who hated Jar Jar as well, but my heart was so filled up when I saw what they did for him because of all the crap that Ahmed Best took over the years. And so they made him one of the greatest heroes in Star Wars lore.
Anytime they bring Hayden Christensen, who plays Anakin Skywalker, the older Anakin.
Yeah.
Anytime they bring him out onto the stage, one of these conventions, and you see all of these folks who were clearly little kids when his movies came out, and they're just applauding and giving him standing ovations.
Isn't it great?
I love it. Because he got so much crap for those movies.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get the train back on the track. But I love all that stuff, and I agree with you 100%.
It's on the same track. It's about healing, and it's about fundamentalism.
I mean, we were sort of talking a little bit earlier about how stand-up comedy, in a way, is really just kind of a modernized version of transmitting these conversations to people. And I was thinking the other day, I mean, your comedy has often reminded me of the grand tradition of like Monty Python.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, they also wrestled with questions of faith. The Pythons were famously irreverent, outrageous, hilarious, but they were also very sincere. I mean, John Cleese has said publicly many times that the Pythons never mocked the teachings of Jesus because there was nothing to mock. The teachings of Jesus was, in their view, unassailable. What they mocked was humanity's hypocrisy around it.
Oh, yeah. Monty Python's intensely moral, in their own immoral way. And so is Carlin. I mean, it's all about who your targets are, right? And that's why good comedy and good Christianity have the same rule: don't punch down.
Yeah.
Python never went after homeless people. Python didn't go after minorities. Python didn't go after the poor. Python went after upper class British society and government and ruling class society and how pompous and pretentious it was.
That's what Jesus does. Jesus does this in the Bible.
Same with Jesus. I mean, you go to a comedy club and you'll hear people about, homeless people. You'll hear people talking about developmentally disabled people using the R word.
Yeah.
It's all punching down. Maybe if you're drunk enough, you'll laugh at the jokes about the homeless guy, maybe, and then feel dirty when you go home. But that's not good comedy. Good comedy punches up at those in power. And so it's the same with religion. Jesus' whole thing was going after those in power, the Roman Empire, the wealthy, who were so certain of their own eminence. These are his targets. He's always defending those less fortunate. And that's the way to go about it in art and in spirituality and in life.
Well, I want to talk about your book a little bit because your book, I almost said your book touches on this topic. Your book is about this topic. Jesus challenged religious nationalism in his own day against the backdrop of the Roman Empire. I mean, he challenged the very idea of Caesar's face on a coin. Ask your Sunday school teacher to do a deep dive on that one if you get a chance, listeners. It's in 3 of the 4 Gospels. He rode in on a donkey or a colt on Palm Sunday, which is a blatant mockery of Pilate's.
The donkey is the most incredible thing. I mean, that was just a straight up act of satire.
Yeah.
Like he so knew what he was doing. And it was fulfilling prophecy from Isaiah as well.
It's mocking Pilate's military parade. Pilate's on the other side of town coming in on a horse and Jesus is coming in on this ridiculous animal.
Yeah, these Romans would show up and it was all spectacle. It was all pomp. It was war horses and banners and chariots and swords. And the people had to come out and cheer and pretend they were excited about this because they were under military occupation. And Jesus shows up on a donkey, which fulfilled the Isaiah prophecy that the king would ride a donkey. But it was just a complete parody.
Yeah.
Of all of this Roman spectacle. And guess what happened? The crowd shows up even bigger and they're cheering for him. And they were calling him king on Palm Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's probably what got him killed. And then, a couple days later, he's in the temple and he's throwing the money changers out in full view of the Romans. I mean, they could see what he was doing. And this was the hub of commerce. This was a hub of profit for both the religious authorities and Rome. And he was disrupting the local economy because they had surge pricing, more or less. You go to the temple and you got to trade your currency for the temple currency, like video game tokens, right? You got to give your money to get their money so you can use the tokens to go buy animals to slaughter like we used to do with grandma all the time. And Jesus was so angry at their surge pricing because it was exploiting the poor.
Yeah.
That hurt him. That same day, he talks about Matthew 25 and says, who's going to heaven, who's not. And then, of course, by the end of the week, all those people that were cheering him on Sunday have turned against him. They arrest him on Thursday night. They put him to death on Friday. And that's the story. Everyone turned on him during that week.
Yeah.
He wasn't the magical Messiah they wanted him to be, so they turned on him. He didn't come to violently oppress Rome. The whole point of the story is not, the Jews killed Jesus. The point of the story is that everyone kills Jesus.
Yes.
By the end of that week, you think about how bad you've had it. This guy is an absolute loser. His friends turn on him. His friends sell him out. His friends deny they even know him. He's murdered like a criminal in the most humiliating of ways, hung naked and meant to bleed to death and suffocate. Richard Rohr calls him this naked, bleeding loser. Bob Dylan sang about the man who came and died a criminal's death. The whole point of the story is that everyone forgives him. The cops and the soldiers and the government and the church and his friends, they all kill him. And he comes back and forgives everyone anyway. And that's the story of life, and that's the story of chaos and order the Bible keeps giving us. There's one constant theme for me in the book, and it's chaos and order. There's chaos and God imposes order. Man throws it into chaos again. Again, don't take it all as literal fact if you don't want to, but you're in the garden, God has order, there's peace, and then they eat the apple and they throw it into chaos. God gives humankind another chance. Then man becomes so defiled and wicked that God sends a flood to kill everybody. God drowned everybody. God drowned every fetus that day, by the way, folks. Drowned every pregnant lady, too.
Oops.
And God forgave us and gave us another chance. God comes to earth in human form and says, love each other, and we respond by killing him. And he comes back 3 days and gives us another chance.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the true story, the chaos and order of humankind in the Bible that says, as badly as we blow it, we'll still have another chance to make it better.
Yeah. Oh, amen. Your book, Separation of Church and Hate. One of the questions I know many churches and faith communities will want to know is, what do you hope that churches and faith groups or local communities or people who organize, how do you hope that they will use your book? What's your dream of what you hope this book can accomplish in a local neighborhood?
Oh, Lord. I just hope that someone will read it and feel less alone. That's it. That was my goal. It's the book I wish someone had given me when I was 17.
Mm.
And I was trying to understand, wait, how can the gay people be evil when I know gay people who are good? I was so tormented by it at 7. I didn't know what was right and what was wrong, and I just tried to live with the contradiction. Okay, I know gay people who are good, wonderful people, and my Bible tells me somewhere that they're evil and going to hell. And I walked around with this contradiction, being a part of it and being ashamed of it and not knowing how to reconcile it on so many issues. And so I wanted to write something for people to know that you're not crazy. So for me, it's like, I know how lonely and weird it can feel. And it seems like, is my side the good guys? Is God the good guy? I'm loyal to God, but are we still the nice ones? And I wanted to write this book just for anyone of any age who doesn't understand how a religion of love can be this thing we all have witnessed. And to remember, the good news is Jesus is not the same as his many unauthorized fan clubs. So any churches that want to take this book and share it and discuss it, I'm just so beyond honored, and it makes me feel so filled with gratitude and grace. But I wrote it for individuals. I wrote it for people who love their parents but don't love their parents' religious views.
Yeah.
I wrote it for anyone who's trying to understand how this Jesus figure of peace can be behind so much war and oppression, because he's not, and we have to separate the man from the fan club. So I really wrote it for individuals, but I will tell you, Mark, I've been shocked and delighted and surprised at how many church communities have taken this book. I did not see that coming. I didn't think it would be the subject of a lot of book discussions in church groups, and I didn't think I'd be invited to speak to so many churches, and that's been a deeply humbling honor, because I'm not against organized religion, but I don't think organized religion is necessarily the only way to walk with God and lead a Christ-like life.
And John, as you're sharing this, that's your story as well. As a teenager, you looked at the state of the world that you lived in, feeling angry and alone. And that moment, hearing George Carlin's words and hearing the laughter of the people around you and realizing, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And I look at the state of the world today. We know that there are young people today that are feeling angry and disenfranchised and alone. And it sounds like what you're hoping will happen is folks like that will read this book and say, okay, I'm not the crazy one after all.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
John Fugelsang is a stand-up comedian and an exegete, despite what he says. And he's also the host of Tell Me Everything, which airs daily on SiriusXM Progress Channel 127. His latest book, Separation of Church and Hate, is available right now from Simon & Schuster in multiple formats, including an audiobook, wherever books are sold. John, I'm so incredibly grateful for the gift of your time. I have been a fan of your stand-up and your comedy since back when I was still a minister in training.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
To get to talk to you like this, this is just so rad, man. Thank you so much for joining us. What an honor.
Honestly, thank you for being such a gentleman and being so spiritually grounded. You have all of the spiritual credibility that I lack, Mark. And so it's very, very lovely of you to invite me here and to talk about this stuff back and forth. Thank you so much.
That's going to just about wrap it up for this episode of Don't Encourage This. My thanks again to my guest John Fugelsang for joining us on the program. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this, you can search up Don't Encourage This on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Player FM, a dial-up modem connection, whatever. And of course, don't forget YouTube. If you'd like to say hello, drop us a line at don'tencouragethis@gmail.com. From Oxford, Ohio, I'm Mark Von Bullock. Thanks again, y'all.